When I call Carl Turner.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. You know, Madam Deputy Speaker, my politics as we cross-swords many a times. So you know it pains me when I congratulate the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Shadow Justice Secretary, for his outstanding contribution. Because there was nothing, really, that I could disagree with. The parts of this bill which are, though, I'm afraid to say, unworkable, unjust, unpopular and unnecessary. Jury trial curtailment. I'm afraid to say as well, the analogy used by the Justice Secretary is unfortunate of somebody stealing a bottle of whiskey. I'm not the most eminent lawyer. I was prosecuting and defending the theft of Mars bars in my second six pupillage before I was elected in May 2010 to this House. So I don't pretend I'm terribly eminent, but never did I see a situation advising in the Magistrates' Court a defendant to be electing for trial because that defendant had allegedly nicked a bottle of whiskey. The scenario's for the birds, to be perfectly honest with you. It's unfortunate, it's disappointing, and I think my friend, the Justice Secretary, could do much better. I think it's absolutely imperative that one of our number who were opposed for principal reasons to these changes has a seat on the Public Bill Committee. I was told by colleagues it's impossible. You're never going to be able to provide that. It's never going to happen. The Chief Whip is never going to concede to one of the so-called rebels being on that Bill Committee. But what I don't appreciate, Madam Deputy Speaker, is officials in the MOJ spinning that even Carl Turner was unable to persuade enough people to rebel against this bill. That isn't right. It's unfair. And I think, frankly, it's unbecoming of a Secretary of State in any department of government. But I abstain today, and I sincerely urge my colleagues to abstain as well. Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, I am more confident now than ever I was that the worst parts of this bill will be defeated at amendment stage, and I ask sincerely to my honourable and right honourable friends to let this have a second reading today and let us make progress to get rid of the bits of this bill which are completely unworkable, unpopular, unjust and unnecessary.
Everybody just witnessed a moment that should seriously worry David Lammy, because this was not your typical back and forth debate, not a routine disagreement, and definitely not something he can easily brush off. This was something far more damaging, because when Carl Turner stood up in that chamber, he didn't come in shouting, attacking, or trying to score cheap political points. Instead, he did something much more dangerous. He calmly, methodically, and almost reluctantly dismantled the very bill his own party is trying to push forward. And that kind of criticism hits harder than any opposition attack ever could. Let's break down exactly what just happened here, because this wasn't random, this was layered, and every part of it exposes a deeper problem. First of all, this came from inside Labour. That alone changes everything. When opposition parties attack, it's expected. It's politics. But when your own MP stands up and publicly describes major parts of your bill as unworkable, unjust, unpopular, and unnecessary, that's not normal criticism. That is a direct signal that something inside the party is not aligned. That is internal fracture, playing out live in front of everyone. And notice the tone Turner used. He even said it pains him to do this. That wasn't accidental. That's a calculated way of saying, I'm not here to attack you personally, but I cannot defend this policy. That makes it even more credible, even more damaging, because it removes any sense of political bias. Then comes the second layer, the exposure of weak reasoning. That analogy about someone stealing a bottle of whiskey? Turner didn't just disagree with it, he completely dismantled it using real-world legal experience. He basically said, this scenario doesn't reflect reality. This is not how cases actually work, and no serious legal professional would rely on this kind of reasoning. And that matters, because once the core argument of a bill starts looking unrealistic or out of touch, the entire foundation begins to collapse. If the logic doesn't hold, the policy doesn't hold. It's that simple. But here's where things really escalate. Turner didn't stop at policy criticism. He went after the process itself. He openly called out the internal dynamics, the idea that dissent is being managed, controlled, even spun in a certain way. He pushed back on the claim that opposition within the party is weak or insignificant. In fact, he made it clear that there are principled objections, and they are stronger than what's being publicly portrayed. That is a huge problem, because now this is no longer just about a weak bill. Now it's about credibility, transparency, and leadership. When MPs start suggesting that internal disagreement is being misrepresented, it raises a much bigger question. What else is being managed behind the scenes? And this is exactly where David Lammy finds himself in a difficult position. You've got a bill under fire from within, you've got experienced voices questioning its practicality, you've got calls for abstention instead of support, and you've got growing pressure to amend or strip out key parts just to make it acceptable. That is not a position of strength. That is a position of vulnerability. And here's the reality of politics. Moments like this don't stay contained. Once a crack appears publicly, it creates space for others to step in. Other MPs start feeling more comfortable speaking out. Quiet concerns turn into open criticism. And before you know it, what was supposed to be a unified push turns into a visible divide. This is how narratives shift. One moment, it's strong leadership pushing necessary reform. The next moment, it's a flawed bill facing resistance from its own side. And once that shift happens, it's very hard to reverse. Because now the question is no longer just about the bill itself. The question becomes, how did this get this far? Who approved this framing? Why were these concerns not addressed earlier? And if they were raised, why were they ignored? That's the kind of scrutiny that doesn't go away after one debate. And the most telling part of all this? Turner didn't call for outright rejection. He called for abstention and amendments. That signals something important. This isn't a minor disagreement. This is a belief that the bill, in its current form, simply cannot stand on its own. It needs fixing, reshaping, possibly even rethinking at a fundamental level. So now the pressure is on. Because if these unworkable and unjust elements are as serious as described, then pushing forward without major changes only increases the political cost. And if more voices join in, this quickly stops being a policy issue and turns into a leadership test. And that's where things stand right now. Not with a dramatic collapse, but with something more subtle and more dangerous. A growing sense that the foundation isn't as solid as it was presented to be. So the real question moving forward is simple. Is this just one MP speaking out? Or is this the beginning of a wider rebellion inside Labour? Drop your thoughts below.